Hi guys, welcome back to the Handspin Review Spot YouTube channel. Please click the subscription button next to you just to help us out and keep up to date with what's going on the channel. It's really much appreciated. Today we're going to have a little discussion about smoothness. It's a word that gets chucked around a lot in the spinner world, and with good reason, because in many ways it has a real connection to what we're all interested in. And it is a difficult word because it's kind of opaque as to what different people mean by smoothness. It's a bit like a musician who plays guitar talking about crunch and, you know, levels of gain and feedback, and there isn't really that obvious a way to quantify it. And I wanted to at least tell you what I think of when I talk about smoothness, so that maybe down the road when you're watching my videos at least you know exactly what I have in mind, but also touch on a couple of different things that you might hear from other people and what they might be meaning when they say smoothness. So let's get to it. As you can see, I've put a few spinners out here on the table because I think they all have something to offer when it comes to this discussion. So this here is the Trillium by One Drop Yo-Yos. This is a great spinner and it is lauded for its smoothness. But why is that? Well, primarily I think the reason why this spinner is lauded for its smoothness is the bearing. This runs it's a 188 bearing, but it's a full stainless steel 188, and they ship with, it has a tiny bit of lubrication in it. It's obviously a very, very fine lubrication because it's still very smooth spinning, or free spinning. See, I've already used the word smooth. And it's also shielded, so that stops it from making too much noise. And when you use a Trillium, it indeed does feel very smooth. It has again, we're going to start already, you see, it has a buttery, sort of silky smooth quality in the hand. Now, it also is what another people would call very smooth and stable on a single finger. Now, perhaps you've heard me, I'm sure, in other videos, if you've watched them, talking about smoothness, and I will often say that's dead smooth. And what I probably should be saying is that's dead stable. Because when I say dead smooth in this instance, what I'm talking about is the fact that the button is absolutely stable on a finger. However, this is a modular design, which means it won't always have that. If One Drop of, you know, happen to have a button on here which has a slightly lower tolerance, so there's a little bit of weight discrepancy or something, you will see some flutter, and that would, to my estimations, make this not as smooth. And that is a tricky thing to quantify. So let's get on to a few others. Okay, so another thing that people tend to mean by smoothness is how a spinner feels as you move it on its axis. When you've got a tri-spinner or a coin spinner or anything with more than two arms, you have a more even distribution of weight, as long as it's still symmetrical, that is, to a certain degree, or the weight is still thrown on symmetrical poles. And what happens with that is that the bearing doesn't experience any particular shifts in load as you move it around, and that gives you a very smooth feeling, and you'll notice that you can wiggle the spinner around and it doesn't really kill much of the spin. Now, if we take a bipole spinner, here we have a Mokutai stubby. This actually needs a clean, but it won't really matter too much for our purposes here. When you move it side to side, you can quickly kill off the spin. As you can see now, that's moving much more slowly, and if I keep on going I should be able to kill the spin completely. There we go. And the reason for that is that you have two large poles of weight that are both spinning around, and as you move them along their axis, the gyroscopic effect has a kind of warping effect on the bearing. It pushes the balls from one side to side within the race, and just gravitationally it will kill a lot of the momentum of the spin. Now, I have never considered that that has anything to do with smoothness, because from my point of view, that's just down to the nature of a bipole spinner. Any bipole spinner, and here we've got another, and this has got a different bearing in it which is incredibly smooth, that if I move it from side to side like this, I can seriously kill the spin. But that doesn't make any odds to the fact that it's an incredibly smooth, very stable spinner. So there you go, that's the first point of discrepancy straight away, is whether or not people mean when you're moving the spinner around, is it still smooth? Or is it a combination of these things? Or is it when it's balanced on a single finger, it's dead stable, and that's what they mean by smooth? Or is it the feedback where you don't have any feedback? And that's where we come to something like this. And to a certain extent, the Trillium has that quality as well. When this is spinning, this is the Cocoon by Pos Blades, it almost doesn't even feel like it's there. Now that's down to the fact that it's using the same 1-drop 10-ball all stainless steel R188 bearing as that Trillium, but also the fact that the weight is extremely evenly distributed. It's then on top of that, there's a lot of mass around the bearing, which means it's very quiet, and that bearing is very quiet already. And when you spin it, it's dead smooth and dead stable, I should say, when it's balanced on a single finger, but equally, it just feels, just incredible. There's loads of gyroscopic effect there, but it never feels like it's slowing down. It's dead smooth. For me, this is almost all bases covered in terms of smoothness. It's dead stable on a single finger. It's dead smooth to move around. As I say, I don't normally consider that something that I use the word smooth for, but other people certainly do. It's just got all the bars covered. So if anyone wants a definition of smoothness from every angle in spinners right now, I would say this is probably it. Now that moves us on to what I've always considered my definition of smoothness, certainly until that came around, but it's still up there. This is the, it's a name to conjure with, the Zero Feud Tri-Compass. Now, this is an incredibly smooth spinner, and unfortunately I've actually swapped the bearing out of this at the moment for a 1-drop, so I'm not going to be able to display what I'm talking about quite as much. But these ship with, when you can get hold of them, these ship with a R188 again, but it's a hybrid ceramic. Now hybrid ceramic, you effectively have two different materials rubbing against each other. You have the very hard ceramic balls running against stainless steel racers. You'll get a little bit more volume from that, which can create some sort of a sensation of something not being as smooth because you get more noise out of it, and that kind of conjures up the idea of friction. But on top of that, it also does just give a hair more feedback than something like the full stainless steel bearings that you get in something like this, certainly when they're very well made. So when you used to spin it, you would get quite a lot of volume on this. Now, as you will hear, this is now whisper quiet because I put one of those bearings in it. But the reason I always considered this my definition of smoothness was how incredibly stable it was on a single finger spin. And admittedly, perhaps I should have said that it was my definition of stability, because that really is what you're talking about in those instances. So that kind of brings us to the end of this. I know that it's kind of a, like I say, it's still an opaque discussion because people will always have different, look at the state of those. They did look pretty when I started this video, didn't they? Everyone will always approach it differently and have a different thing they mean when they say smoothness. But when you hear the word smoothness on this channel, and I'll try and use the word stability more often when I'm talking about single finger spin and having no wobble or anything like that. But really, I think now, as we've got things like the Trillium coming out and things like this, what people are going to mean more and more when they talk about smoothness is this super silent, you know, is it or isn't it spinning quality that something like the Pos Blades Cocoon has. It's immensely smooth. It's the definition of smooth. It's like, it's syrupy, buttery sweetness. It's just fantastic. I'm starting to wax lyrical about the spinner again, and I shouldn't, as a review already. But it has become the definition, and I think the Trillium really brought that into the frame with its use of a full stainless steel bearing of the good tolerances that it has, but it's been taken on even further in a non-modular design like this, and that really is going to be, I think, for an awful lot of people, what they mean now when they talk about smoothness and what really the Trillium brought to the table itself, rather than just stable. So there you go, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been semi-useful. It will certainly help you with what I mean when I talk about these things, and it will certainly, I hope, answer some of the questions that I've been getting recently about this topic. Thanks very much, guys. Catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.